In this video, I'm going to be talking about the most common pronunciation problems that Spanish speakers have in English. I will be focusing on speakers who are from Spain, however, many of the problems may also apply to people from other countries that speak Spanish. Many of the problems that I'm going to talk about in this video may not necessarily affect intelligibility, so please don't worry about completely changing the way you speak. Just approach this video from an educational perspective. Maybe you're a teacher who wants to help their students, or you're a learner who's simply interested in pronunciation. So I will be dividing this video up into 3 different sections. We'll be talking about the problems with vowels, the problems with consonant sounds, and then just overall general problems and advice that I want to give you as a Spanish speaker. For learners, there will also be some exercises with each of them, so you can practice as we're going along. So let's get started with the vowels. In total, Spanish has 5 different vowel sounds. Catalan speakers, if you are watching, then you have 8, and some of these vowels in Catalan are shared in English, so it means that things are a little bit easier for you. Spanish does not distinguish vowels through length, so this means that you don't have differences like I, o, and so on. The vowels in Spanish are quite short, so this makes certain sounds like I and I quite difficult to pronounce and distinguish. So let's have a practice. Sheep, ship. So the first one is longer, sheep, and you smile more. Then the second one, ship. We don't smile and it's shorter. Sheep, ship. Seat, sit. Another pair is oo and u. For example, fool, full. Fool, full. Pool, pull. Pool, pull. So really mind the length of that first vowel. Make sure it's longer. Another pair is or and o. Court, cot. Port, pot. So again, pay attention to the vowel length. If you are a fellow teacher and you'd like to help your students with the vowel length and understanding how long to get those vowels, I like to tell my students to imagine that they're making some bread or pizza or something, and they have the dough of the bread or the pizza, whatever they're making, and every time they need to stretch out a vowel, I want you to imagine that they are also stretching out the dough, okay? I know it sounds a bit weird, but I'll give you an example. So imagine they have the dough, they are kneading the dough, and then when they have a word with a long vowel, court, they stretch out the dough. Cot, cot, very short. Court, court. They're kneading, they're stretching that dough, and it will help them get the length of the vowel right. Another problem is with the diphthong o and or. So, for example, coat, court, coat, court. A really common one is low, low, law, law. Now the sound and the schwa can end up being pronounced pretty much the same because again, they're pretty similar and length is sometimes a little bit tricky for Spanish speakers. So pay attention to again, get that dough, stretch it, What tends to happen with the sound with Spanish speakers is because Spanish is a phonetic language, they will quite often read the word and they will try to pronounce the vowel that's written. So for example, bird will become something like beard and girl will become girl. So they will try to pronounce the actual letter as it's pronounced in their language, if that makes sense. Another example is with the word purse. Now, many Spanish speakers, they will look at the spelling of this, they will see that U in the spelling and they will read it as purse. So they will change that U to an U, as it's how you would read it in Spanish, okay? It's logic, it makes sense, but English is not phonetic, doesn't work the same way. So purse is how we would pronounce it, but of course, depending on the accent of the person, it could change. Now with the schwa, if you're a Catalan speaker, you're in luck because you do have the schwa in your language. However, Spanish speakers who don't speak Catalan, you're gonna struggle a little bit, and I know, but what you tend to do is you really strengthen the vowels here. So the schwa sound is very, very weak. If we take a look at the word about, Many Spanish speakers will take a look, they will see that A at the beginning, and they will just say about, and they will pronounce that vowel very strongly. However, in English, what we would do is we would weaken it because it's not a strong syllable, so it will be pronounced as about, about. Now, another great word to show this is the word banana. Now notice I'm not saying banana, which a lot of Spanish speakers would do, because of course they would see the A there and they would just say, ah, makes sense, right? Because that's how you do it in Spanish. Not in English, we would weaken it because those syllables are not strong. The first and the final syllables are with a schwa. So we would say banana, banana. At the end of words as well, such as teacher, computer, many Spanish speakers may say teacher, computer, and they would add an er sound. Again, you see that E in the spelling and you think, oh, it's an eh. Okay, but again, we would have a schwa here. It's not like Spanish, it would be softer and weaker and we'd have a schwa. Again, this does depend on the person's accent and the variety of English that you're learning and you're listening to, but in modern received pronunciation, you will hear teacher, teacher, and computer, computer. So it's a lot more relaxed and it's a lot softer. Again, Catalan speakers, you're gonna find this a lot easier. If you think of the word for house in Catalan, it's not like in Spanish or like casa, where it's like really strong, but in Catalan, it's a lot softer. It's more like casa, if I remember. Apologies for my Catalan accent, but it's a lot softer at the end there. It's like casa. That makes sense? Now this one is a big one. The sounds a, and are quite often pronounced with the same a sound by Spanish speakers. So words like cat, cut, and cart are quite often pronounced with the same vowels. So they're pronounced like cat, cat, and cart. Of course, with the exception of cart, a lot of Spanish speakers would trill, that is to trill the R there. But the vowel would stay the same for many Spanish speakers. So really focus on the mouth placement and also the length with these vowels. So we have cat, like a Spanish a, cat, cut. So make sure you drop your jaw this time. Cat, cut, cat, cut. And then the last one, focus on the length. Cart. So cat, cut, cart. Stretch out that dough, remember? Cat, cut, cart. Here's another one. Pat, pot, part. Pat, pot, part. Now let's take a look at consonants. So what tends to happen with Spanish speakers is that a lot of your words start with ist, isp, and so on. And to pronounce words that start with just a s sound in English, like Spain, is quite difficult. Many speakers would add that e to the beginning and they would say Spain. This doesn't really affect intelligibility, don't worry, but if it's something you want to work on, then you can. Let's have a practice together. So we have Spain. Just practice elongating that vowel. Spain, Spain. Stain, stain. Spin, spin. Skin, skin. So notice that all of these are s followed by a voiceless plosive after. And this tends to be what the problem is. It's that voiceless plosive straight after the S sound. So just practice on working on elongating that S. Another common problem is distinguishing V and B. Now, what happens in Spanish is that when you write a V or a B, you pronounce it the same way, but not in English, we pronounce them differently. So V is usually pronounced with the top teeth just pressing on the inside here. Very, very similar to a F sound, but you're just adding voice and vibration. The B sound exists in English as well, so you don't have to worry about learning that. So we have van, ban, vet, bet. So really focus on the V sound. If you're not sure how to do it, just think of how to do a F, like fun, fan, etc. But just add voicing here. Now the next one is a very common problem that speakers of many languages have, and it's doing the voiced v sound. Many Spanish speakers, particularly if you are from Spain, you will be able to do the th sound, so the voiceless equivalent, but the voiced one can be tricky because it's not present in Spanish. So make sure you put your tongue in between your teeth. I do have a full video on this that you can go and check out, and just make sure that you are vibrating your vocal cords here. So you have v, so we have van, dan, then, den. So what Spanish speakers tend to do is they pronounce like dis, dad, these, those instead of this, that, these, those. So it's just something to work on. Again, many people do this, even native speakers of some varieties of English say dis, that, these, those, and so on, and don't have the voice th like th present in their variety. So it doesn't always affect intelligibility. Don't worry about this one. Now the sounds j, zh, and z are also not present in Spanish. However, lucky Catalans, again, you have these present in your language, so it makes things a little bit easier. But for those Spanish speakers who don't speak Catalan, let's have a practice together. So we have juice, juice, and judge, judge. Make sure that you're pronouncing it quite strongly, because what many Spanish speakers will do is they will soften it, they will make it voiceless, and they'll say something like choose. So it sounds almost like choose, if that makes sense. Like, I choose this color. So be very careful with the voicing. Make sure you're vibrating your vocal cords here. Juice, juice. Judge, judge. Be particularly careful with that second word as well, because we've got that j sound at the start and at the end of the word. So make sure you keep that voicing going from the start to the end. Judge, judge. The next one, vision, vision. So not vision. Keep the voice, the vibration going. Vision, confusion, confusion. And the last one, zoo. So not sue with a s, but try and voice it again. Z, z. Zoo. Pause, pause. Now this isn't actually on my list, but I want to mention it, so it's kind of a bonus, but it's something I hear happen a lot with my Spanish speaking students, is they will see a word in English that looks very similar to a word in Spanish. So let's take pause, for example. It looks very similar to pausa, right? So what many Spanish speakers will do is they'll think, well, pausa is like pause, it looks the same, right? So it must also be said in the same way, but that's not necessarily true. So you got to be really careful that you're not using Spanish words and Spanish pronunciation as a crutch to help you with English, because no doubt the English pronunciation is completely different. So be careful. Another common problem for Spanish speakers is voiced consonants at the end of words. Now, voiced consonants don't really exist at the end of words in Spanish, so it's quite difficult to do that in English because it doesn't exist much in your first language. Okay? Makes sense. So be careful with words like bed and bet. What many Spanish speakers will do is they will say bet and bet. They will say as a t and a t at the end. So make sure you're really voicing that final consonant sound where it's needed. Bed, bet. Another one is sad, sat. So many students might say, I am very sad, instead of I am very sad. So make sure you get that d, 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 that voiced sound here. Sad, sat. Similar to this is words ending with a z sound. So words like face and phase can end up sounding the same with a Spanish speaker. So be very careful. Make sure you get that z, that voicing at the end. Now I know z doesn't exist, so you've got to practice, again, unless you're a Catalan speaker. So we've got face, which is a s, and phase with that voiced z. Face, phase. Another one is price, prize, price, prize. Another common problem is with n, like no, and like king. If they appear at the end of a word, many Spanish speakers can just forget sometimes and change this more into an sound, like mum, let's say. What can also happen with some words that end with an sound, they can end up removing this. So them becomes like thing, and they end up kind of nasalizing the vowel instead of pronouncing the sound. I'll give some examples. So in the sentence, I like them, many speakers, if they're speaking quite quickly, they'll say something like, I like them. And instead, that becomes more of a nasalized vowel instead of an sound. So it's just a case of paying more attention to your mouth when you're speaking here. I like them. I like them. I went with them yesterday. Not I went with them yesterday. I went with them. I went with them yesterday. Let's just practice the n and n at the end of words. So we have fin, thing, fin, thing, fan, fang, fan, fang. Now the r in Spanish is trilled, and this means that we do something like r, like this in order to do it. Now, this does occur in some accents in English as well, but if you're wanting to learn modern received pronunciation or received pronunciation, then we don't trill the R in these varieties. Instead, I have a full video talking all about how to pronounce the R, but you'll see the difference here. So if I say ready and ready, see the difference? Ready, ready. Around, around. Around, around. So be careful. Grow, grow. So what happens when we have a consonant and a r together? We kind of join them both together. So you get something like gr, gr, grow, grow. Same happens with br, brown, brown. We join those consonant sounds together. So don't try and pronounce them separately, like brown or grow or something, but try and join them together. Brown, grow. This happens with other consonant clusters as well. This is just an example for you. Now the h sound isn't something that is featured in Spanish. So what many Spanish speakers will do is they will replace this with a h sound, as in like jamón. So many speakers, instead of saying happy, will say happy. I'm very happy. So be careful with this. Again, it doesn't affect intelligibility at all. People will still know you're saying happy if you say happy. But if you want to start working on this sound, just imagine that you have a mirror in front of you and you want to try and fog up the mirror. So you go like this. And that is how you do the sound. So let's have a practice. Ham, Harry. Ham, Harry. Again, there's no problem if you do say ham or Harry or even Harry. People will know what you're talking about. So it's not a super big problem and it won't affect intelligibility. But of course, if it's something that you want to change, then you can do that. So just imagine that glass and you're trying to fog up that glass. Now the y sound sometimes gets changed to a j sound. So yellow ends up sounding like jello and so on. Your ends up sounding like your, jaw, your, jaw. So in English, these are two completely different words, so be careful. Another example is use and juice. Use, juice, juice. So with that second one, my tongue here is touching the top of my mouth. But with the y sound, it's just the sides of my tongue that come up. The middle part of my tongue isn't touching the top of my mouth at all. And that's the biggest difference here. Now the final one that I want to talk in this consonant section is the w sound. Now you might be thinking, well, what? It's not too difficult to do. But what can sometimes happen at the beginning of a word, especially if there is an u sound straight after it, like in wood, many Spanish speakers will change this and they'll say something like good, like could you help me? So make sure that you're not pronouncing this w like a g here. Nothing is going on at the back here, just w. The only thing you're changing is just the shape of your mouth. Would, would. Let's compare would, good, would, good, good. Now let's talk about some overall problems and some general advice that I want to give Spanish speakers. Now, as mentioned before, Spanish is a phonetic language. English is not a phonetic language, but many Spanish speakers will try to read English as though it is phonetic, and you just can't do that. English just doesn't work like that. It's not a phonetic language. So this ends up causing problems with words like liked, where many Spanish speakers will say liked instead. Now, I do consider this quite an important thing because, of course, it does affect intelligibility. I'm quite used to Spanish accents and the ways that Spanish speakers speak English, but many people may not be, so they might hear you saying like it and wonder what on earth you're trying to say. So really try and watch that you're not pronouncing English as it is written. Otherwise, it's just not gonna work, unfortunately. Now, Spanish doesn't really do consonant clusters like English does. We can stretch up to 4 consonants in one go in English. So this makes it quite difficult for some Spanish speakers. But watch that you're not cutting any of the consonant sounds, especially at the end of words. So if we take, for example, breakfast, many Spanish speakers might say breakfast, and they cut the t at the end. This goes the same with words like text. Many Spanish speakers might say text, and can't becomes something like can, and they cut the T at the end. So be really careful that you're not doing this too much, because again, it can affect intelligibility and might confuse some people, especially if you're confusing words like can't and can. If you cut the T at the end, then it can sound like can, so be very careful there. Now, what's really important to note is that Spanish is a syllable-timed language. What does this mean? It means that each single syllable is given the same amount of time. So when you speak Spanish, you sound like you sound like a machine gun, you sound super fast. Spanish, as well, is also one of the fastest spoken languages. I think Japanese is just above that one, and then Spanish is in second place. English is a lot slower. So again, not a tip that's included on my list, but slow down when you speak English, because I know English sounds fast to you, but I promise you, it's not because of the speed, it's because of other things. It's because of the strong and weak forms and things like that, which is not something you use in Spanish. English is a stress time language, meaning that we have strong and weak forms of words. Spanish doesn't have this. But you need to get used to the idea that there are weak forms of words. I have a full video dedicated on this that you can go and check out after watching this one, but it will greatly help you with your listening and understanding, especially if you think that English speakers speak fast, because we don't. We actually speak very slowly. But Spanish speakers, please, feel free to slow down when you speak English. You do not have to speak the speed of Spanish in English. It does not work. If anything, it will cause many problems. Many people won't be used to the speed that you're speaking at. You'll be speaking too fast, and it will cause problems when you're trying to talk to other people. So slow down, and also get used to the idea that the stress is different in English. There are strong and weak forms. Now, intonation does differ slightly between English and Spanish. I could go into this in a lot more detail, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to focus on the difference between Spanish and English question intonation. Now, question intonation in Spanish, usually your intonation rises at the end when you ask a question. However, in English, it can rise or it can fall. I have a full video dedicated to this, so go and check it out after watching this. I'll link it down in the description for you. So what's happened to me quite a few times is while I've been talking to students or Spanish-speaking friends, I've asked them a question and haven't thought about the fact that I used a falling intonation with my question, and the person who I was talking to thought I was just saying something, just giving a statement. They didn't realise it was a question until I said to them, that was a question. Get used to the idea that intonation for questions in English can rise or it can fall. Again, go and check out the video that I mentioned. I talk about it in loads more detail, and just get used to listening for the question structure as opposed to just listening for a rising intonation, because a rising intonation doesn't always indicate that it's a question. Be aware that some questions have a falling intonation. And that's everything for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and you've learned something new. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know down in the comments which of the problems I mentioned in today's video you had before watching this, and hopefully we have fixed them for you. Just to remind people of the disclaimer, I'm not trying to change anyone who has a Spanish accent at all and make you sound like the Queen of England or anything like that. It's simply just an educational tool for teachers and for learners to use if they want to learn more about pronunciation, work on their pronunciation, or whatever. Just want to make that super clear. Remember, if you're serious about improving your pronunciation, the Pronunciation Pro membership site is open and waiting for you with hundreds of pronunciation lessons inside, plus daily feedback on your pronunciation and recordings. Go check that out, it's linked in the description. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!